This is the Beyond Belief Sobriety podcast, where we examine topics of interest to people who seek a secular path to recovery from addiction. I can't believe it's been almost 2 months since we put out a podcast episode, and that's not because I haven't been recording them. It's just that I have not been editing and posting them. I'm so sorry about that. This particular episode we recorded back in January. At that time, I was needing some guests, so I put out a call for help on our Facebook group, and one of the people who volunteered was Rich L. He wrote that he had helped start a secular AA meeting in his area, and I thought it would be interesting to have him on to share his personal story of recovery and how and why he started this meeting and how things are going today. So I think that you're going to enjoy this episode. It was a fun one. I was in kind of a light mood, and I think that Rich was too, so we had a good time talking. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Let's start, if you don't mind, with your story. How did you ever get involved with Alcoholics Anonymous? I imagine that you must have drank a little bit at one time in your life.
Yes, I was a drinker. That's how I ended up in AA. Yeah. So I have been to meetings where people come to AA and say, you guys help me stop smoking, but that's not why I'm a member of AA. If that works for you, that's awesome. Yeah. So let's see, how it was, I was born into a family of alcoholics, I guess. I would describe my parents as alcoholics. Certainly my father was quite alcoholic. And, I had the somewhat chaotic but loving upbringing that comes with, sort of a functional alcoholic kind of a situation. There was, some things happened. But I was as a kid, I was pretty shy and, really didn't connect with people. And I had a lot of experiences with bullying in junior high school and elementary school. So, being an awkward kid, during high school, I did kind of find my way a little. I always had a few friends, but I wouldn't ever describe myself as comfortable or socially successful. And I did kind of just feel like I didn't understand how to do it, right? Life, maybe, not just, and, I guess in hindsight, that had something to do with maybe being, I didn't learn a lot of these things from my parents because they were busy. So they did their best, but they were busy. And so, in college, I started drinking, really. My parents were very controlling about my behavior. They were worried about it. I guess they didn't want me to, I don't know. But and it wasn't that important to me. I drank a few times in high school, but in college, I really discovered it. And, it really felt like it, it's like a lot of stories you hear in AA. It seemed to work for me, right? And I was able to expand my social network and actually basically become a relatively, what I thought of as a normal person, connecting with people and having friends. I don't, in hindsight, maybe that wasn't just the alcohol, maybe it was just the time of life too. But I thought the alcohol was really what it was. And I'm a pretty intense person, so I got pretty into it, so basically that started it. And, from there it was up and down. I had a very poor academic record in college. It was a combination of drinking and going on tour with the Grateful Dead and discovering weed, LSD, and all the great things that happened to me. I thought, it was a kind of a magical time, but it wasn't an academic time. I entered the workforce. I entered the tech workforce because I've always been smart. I just couldn't apply myself in college to pass advanced exams. Actually, what happened was I switched to history from hard science, and it was a lot easier.
Oh, and I like history. I wish I would have studied that, actually. I wish I would have studied something I actually liked. Maybe I would have done that better, even with my drinking, but who knows?
Yeah, and ironically, it was a voyage of self-discovery because I studied European history, but I studied a lot of religious history. Of course, medieval history is religious history, so I ended up taking a lot of religious classes just to try to figure that out.
Did you have a religious background? Did you go to church as a kid?
Oh, well, no, I had my families were, my dad's family was Baptist, and my grandmother kept telling me I was going to go to hell because my father wasn't taking me to church. But I didn't go to church, no. But that, of course, planted the seed that maybe I needed to know something there. I always rejected religion, but I always tried to find a way. Uh, I was always interested in it. I think what I'm really looking for, is a belief system that makes sense in the 21st century. You know, I haven't found one. The Buddhist stuff has been the most valuable to my recovery. Um, so I guess to continue, I went out in the world and I had, ups and downs. And I guess, a lot of the AA sayings kind of can cover that. It was fun. Then it was fun with trouble. Then it was mostly trouble for the last 5 or 10 years I was drinking. I quit, I quit about almost, I could quit 2 and 3/4 years ago, basically, was the last time I drank. I came to AA because I had a couple relapses when I tried to quit drinking on my own. What I was really doing when I was trying to quit on my own was pick a date in the future where there was a major event that I wanted to drink and then relapse there. So I did that a couple of times. And the second time, my wife was like, I realized that that wasn't going to work, and my wife was very uncomfortable. She was happy that I was, mostly sober, but she wasn't cool with it, and neither was I. Um, and so I started going to a noon group, like around the corner from here.
I was going to ask you, where are you from?
Oh yeah, I live in Mountain View, California.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
in the
okay.
heart of Silicon
It's always
Valley.
good to know what part of the country someone's from because life is so different wherever depending on where you live in this country. And I know California, it can be different too. That I always, as a Midwesterner, I always think of California as like Los Angeles, or San Francisco, but California can be very different in some of the smaller towns and so forth outside of the metropolitan area, just like anywhere else, really. So what was it like when you went to your meeting? What was your impression there?
Well, there was the religious aspect of it right away, right? And I mean, you sit down, you look, you read. I went to one of those meetings where they put the steps and the traditions up and it's every day. Uh, I went to a couple, then I settled on one. It's called R&B. It's over here in Sunnyvale, and I'm reading them, and I knew that AA could work for atheists and free thinkers because I have two friends that have been sober most of the time I've known them, and they were very not believers. So I'm reading the steps, and I'm not really believing. Like, I can't believe God is in almost literally every one of them.
I was shocked when I saw that. I did not realize that at my first meeting when I saw God everywhere. That threw me for a loop because when I ever saw AA in the movies, they never talked about God or anything. But there it was. I was like, what's weird?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
It's just an initial thought, but then whatever.
but then I had a lot of, then when I was reading the traditions, and then, I hit on tradition number three, right? The only, so I'm like, well, if that's the truth, then I'm just going to believe what I believe and figure it out later, but I can't do this on my own. So I have to try this. I knew there were other avenues, but you go on the AA website and you see there's all these meetings, and so many choices. I think somebody said there's like 700 pre-COVID. There were like 700 meetings in the Bay Area. Most of them are too far to drive, but there's got to be 100 meetings I can drive to in 30 minutes a year. So, which is the main reason that I've perpetually stuck with AA. I've flirted with other groups. But the critical mass we have really has a lot to do with it. So anyway, I went to the meeting, and the one thing that became apparent right away after I went for a couple of days was, that this meeting was a good. People were very positive. I'd gone to another group nearby, and it was very sullen. And this particular group was very spirited. And and I went to a Friday, like Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then came Friday, and they gave out chips, and it was like, oh my goodness, all these people are getting chips, and there was a woman who got a 40-year chip, and I just like, and then I realized, I'm tearing up a little thinking about it. It's just like, yeah, I can do this. They did this. These people are fine. Some of them are weird. These people are fine. Some of them are, they seem to range the gamut of normal humans from, rich to poor, successful to unsuccessful, happy to sad. They were all there. They were all good, and they weren't drinking. And on that first day, I realized that I could get a 2-month chip. So that was also really exciting for me. I got a 2-month chip. So yeah. So I showed up. I spent a month or so, 2 or 3 weeks looking around before I got a sponsor. I did decide to get a sponsor, and I started working the steps after that with my sponsor. I had a lot of trouble with the God stuff. But then there was a woman, this wonderful woman named Jean. I haven't seen her for a year. I hope she's doing well over at that R&B group. And she was a retired school teacher, and she told me about Russell Brand's book. And she said, read. You sound like you need to read Russell Brand's book. So I got that book, and I'm reading the big book, right? And like, to the atheists and like to the wives, and it's like, oh my God. Right. And I'm having a lot of trouble with that. And so I just kind of pivoted and started doing all my step work in Russell's book. And I don't know if you've read Russell's book.
I haven't. I have not yet.
It's not very big. And it's got 12 chapters,
Okay. I might try to actually read it today, because we have a book club on our Facebook group, and we're actually going to be talking about Russell Brand's book tomorrow, and I haven't read it. So maybe today.
Oh, I know that. I should go to that.
Yeah.
So it's, his book is part autobiographical and part explaining how 12 steps works, and, his trouble with the God word. And he admits that he's not an atheist anymore, which I kept reading anyway. But he really, in a way, his book is better because, in AA we have, the 12 and 12 in the big book, and you have what people say you should do because of what it says on certain pages. But, there's been a movement in AA to say they want a workbook for a long time, right? And I don't think we can ever get one, because my workbook would look totally different than other people's workbooks. So I don't think it's even possible. But his book really does concretely lay out what he thinks you should do, which is in some cases a superset of anything I've ever been asked by anyone to do as part of a 12-step the AA 12 steps. So I did my step work, and I went through a really good phase where I was very happy, the pink cloud, I guess. I hate speaking. And one of the things that bothers me, having been so long in, is it's like going to church. People have the book and they have the highlights and they're saying the sayings, and there's so many of them. And it gets to be like reflexive and not contemplative. And so anyway, I did all that. I did my step work. I had a pretty good period. How it's been since, I have been able, what my basic approach to it was, I did the step work with my sponsor relatively quickly, over the course of a few months, maybe 6 months. And, going through, the resentments and all the fears and all these, the inventory was was pretty enlightening for me. I think I grew a lot out of that. I kind of got to the end of that, and it's kind of like, ask God to, this is kind of another place where it kind of gets off the rails for me. Ask God to remove them. And so then I'm asking around, so what do you do now? Like, will you ask God to remove your defects? And it seemed to me there's a large school of thought that says that's what you do. Period.
People just take it literally. I feel sorry for the people actually who really, really believe in God, because if they think that God's going to remove their character defects and that's all they have to do, they're really not going to benefit from the growth that comes with recovery. But I tell you what happens is they end up doing the same thing that you and I do, but they think that God has something to do with it, I suppose, or at least they say that God has something to do with it. But basically they go to therapists and they improve themselves in whatever way that works for them.
Yeah, I hope they do.
I hope so. They do. Most of them don't. Some don't.
Right. I don't think most people do.
Maybe they don't.
I do think, I was in therapy at the beginning, basically I started my sobriety journey because of something that happened on Christmas Day, almost 3 years ago, or just over 3 years ago. I went to a therapist, and he was an addictions therapist. I didn't really know it at the time. He was the one who would take my thing, right? How that is. He recommended that I go to AA. But I didn't get once I arrived there, I didn't get the impression that there was a lot of people in therapy. And my therapist did tell me, hey, if you're doing AA, it's free. I cost you like $100 a visit. So at some point I stopped seeing him while I was doing my step work. He's since retired, or I think I would probably be talking to him again. I think getting back into therapy is probably something I should do at some point. but once I did the inventory and basically my approach was it didn't make any sense to just pray or go to meetings and have thoughts about it. I recognized that I had problems with acceptance, and I had problems living in the real world. I had anger management problems, and did at that time feel that I needed to, quote, grow spiritually. And what really worked for me was a lot of the Buddhist psychology books. Using the kind of a lot of the ideas of Buddhism sans any mysticism really did help me, along with some other self-help resources. So basically what I did was I talking to others and researching, tried to find resources that would address the things the character traits that came out of my inventory. And I did that with earnestness for a while. Now, once COVID hit, like everything fell to crap, but I did a pretty good job for a while. That looked like finding podcasts. Sometimes it was your podcast. Sometimes it was, and then another revelation I had was, hey, I'm not really great at reading these self-help books. Let's just buy them and listen. Let's buy the audiobook. And so, but the time that I would do that would really be the 40 minutes or so to and from work, which is a pretty long time. If you do it, 2-3 days a week, you can read books and pretty quickly. Of course, middle of March, I stopped going to work. I haven't been back. I've changed jobs since then. Now I work for a company in another city even, so I don't drive there either.
You're working from home?
I've been working from home full time since March, and I'm very fortunate that as a knowledge worker, I can do that. And and that the economy is held up, and that I was even had the opportunity. Basically, I was unemployed when I came into the rooms, and that was one of the catalysts for me coming into the rooms. I actually lost control of my startup company, and the guy blamed it on my drinking, but it wasn't. It was much more complicated than that, and I'd been sober. Anyway, but it was much more complicated than that. But alcohol was certainly a factor, and that was one of the big revelations I had as I did the steps. I came into AA thinking that I was really a high bottom drunk, and and I never really had any troubles. I've never had a DUI, I've never been in jail, I never lost a job over alcoholism. I thought, except for maybe that last one, But after a whole lot of thinking and thoughts, thinking and reflection, I realized no, my professional career would be quite different if I had I had not been so hungover, and I had not had, and not, for example, I was in a job for a while where after the trade show we would just go out and get drunk, and then I got a new boss, and my reaction was to do the exact same thing because that's what we always did. Everyone else was smart enough not to do that, but I made a spectacle of myself.
Sure. I did too.
In front of, the senior vice president, right? The senior vice president of Fortune 500 company. So yeah, I didn't get the promotion. No.
Yeah. And we don't think about that at the time, but yeah.
No, I totally didn't think it was related, and the thing that I think is the worst, alcohol is just so totally evil because, it has a built-in anesthesia, right? So it either rounds off or completely deletes the things that we really need to know. And even just the rounding off of it, made me come to all the wrong conclusions about what had actually happened.
Mm-hmm. So has your opinion of, or your thoughts of the steps changed since you actually did that initial step work?
No, I don't. Well, I don't know what. Well, let me. When I did them, I felt like they were very, very useful. So despite the fact that they had God in them, so I met a couple of folks early on, and we would sit together in meetings, and it's like, we got to start a meeting. We got to, there's a secular thing. We got to start a meeting, but which we started to work on. But in the meantime, yeah, I could, I found the little book and Russell Brand, and so I was doing the real work. And so it wasn't, so the God thing fell away while I did the step work, right? I didn't worry about God in relation to the steps. I hear so many people talk about how they couldn't do the step because, it had the word God in it. What I did what I did for my spirituality in AA was, being overly analytical. The reason that I decided the reason that we have the higher power is because we can't trust our own judgment. And the book specifically says about alcohol. People misinterpret that to think they can't trust their own judgment. And certainly if you're right, and certainly if you're in the throes of it, you probably can't trust your own judgment. I just talked about that.
And unfortunately, there are sponsors who kind of tell people that too. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, and so going forward, you're sober now. Your mental capacity relatively intact now. No, you're not. You should not give up your provenance, right? You should not give up your power. But so we're powerless over alcohol. We have to, we need help. I decided that what we really need is just to recognize that we're not God. Recognize we're not in control. Recognize the world is bigger and more powerful than us. And you didn't need a superpower to do that. One of my friends, I had a long talk with him about it, and he said his higher power was physics. And, he said, well, you can't change physics, right? Physics is physics. Physics is not supernatural. And, being overly and so when I had the conversation with him, I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. Yes, I can use physics or, something like that. But then my reading of the book and the steps says that literally people want to give things to their higher power and expect something to come back. It seems very clear from reading the book to me, literally, if I step back and try to get more ethereal with it, maybe. And so that made me really uncomfortable with the idea of using something like physics, something like nature, something that doesn't give back, can't be my higher power according to the bullshit in the book. And so I decided that the group would be my higher power. And so I just would use the group whenever God came up in the context of asking for help or other things that you do in the steps, right? It's the group. And I think that's what, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah. It's always been other people who have helped me.
Yeah. I mean, every single time in my life, even when I was in the throes of it and I was drunk or something, if I was ever in a situation where I needed help, I was able to find it, and I know other people in life have had other experiences.
Absolutely. That was my break with my original home group that I went to for 25 years. And what happened is after 25 years, I realized I was an atheist, and I started talking about my recovery in a very different way, in more practical terms and without the God stuff. And then I got even more bold and started disputing some of what I heard there. But I'll never forget this one meeting. There was a reading, and I think it might be from the big book, but this came from the 24-hour book, whatever that book is. And it said that the time and place will come when there will be no human power who can help you, that you will drink, that there's no other human power that can help you. That's it, right? And it's that specific. It says only God can help you. There's going to come that time when no human power can help. And I said, I don't believe that's true for me. I explained to the group that, as long as that I've been in AA, there has always been another human being who could help me. I have never been like on some desert island where there is no other human being that could help, and plus now, I've got the internet. There's all kinds of ways to connect with other human beings, and they've always been there for me. So I said, I don't believe in God. So I don't think that applies, but people, were very upset with me, and they went around the room and they corrected me and told me how wrong I was, that I totally missed the point that people will that only God can help me. And it was such a stark contrast between me and them, and a difference that I couldn't. I said, well, wow, if you won't accept this view of mine, I just can't. That's it for me. And it was around that time that I started a secular meeting here in KC. But that was it for me. These are people that I knew for 25 years, and they really couldn't accept this secular view that I had.
And I think that's kind of where I'm at. Like what it's like today during COVID. we started a secular meeting. It meets at a church in Palo Alto on Wednesday at 6 o'clock normally.
Are you meeting in person
Obviously,
now?
oh no, of course not. There was a brief time when the church opened up. I floated that with membership, and no one was interested. It would have been, in hindsight, I kind of wished we'd done it for a couple of weeks in the summer because it would have been safe-ish, and we're not going to see each other now for a while, but um, for good reason. I definitely believe in COVID.
Oh, me too.
I want to make sure you know I believe in COVID.
Me too.
Um, yeah, and I go to two normie meetings, one of which I'm the treasurer for, which is both a bane, which is both a wonderful bane, I guess. It's like I have to go. It's a lot less work during COVID to be the treasurer for a meeting with no expenses. But it used to be quite a hassle because we rent from the city, and it involved a lot of paperwork, and I don't mind doing it. So I keep going to these two normie meetings because the normie meetings, mainline meetings, whatever you want to call them, they're local meetings. I want to keep in touch with real people. I'm not ready to go fully virtual. I think there's great things about it, of course. Yeah, but I find myself kind of not wanting to speak my truth in those meetings at different times, and part of the reason is because I don't know. When there were more newcomers in the room, I felt more inclined to tell my story. The R&B meeting was a good example where they bring it's linked with one of these Kaiser help programs. And so there's always a lot of newcomers there. So saying, my truth, that there's a secular way, is helpful to some of them, right? So I want to make sure I do it. But now I'm going to these meetings, and it's primarily the same people that have always been going to these meetings. And I kind of feel like if I'm telling them, kind of the way I feel about it is that if you're constantly saying that the key to your sobriety is this relationship with this thing that frankly I don't think exists, I think that's wonderful for you. And I totally see how your life is totally better than it was before. And now you're a great person. And before you were homeless or, suffering, even if you weren't. The problem is I can't learn from you anything because your sobriety is due to magic, and I'm trying to stay sober, not using magic. And so I'm really concerned oftentimes about accidentally saying that exact what I just said out loud in the meeting, because it's not helpful to them.
No. It's really weird too. My observation of people in AA is, and I could be wrong, and I've been around the rooms for a long time, but the one group that I went to for decades, my impression was that the people in the room weren't particularly religious. Okay, as far as church going people, there were some who were Catholic and went to church because that out of a social type of a thing, but they weren't like evangelicals that were like really Bible thumping evangelical Christians. I never got that impression anyway. But when it came to AA, they were.
Right. Some relatively normal people. And then they're just like, oh, and you're like, that's wonderful.
AA became the religion, and it was my religion. And I came to that realization after quite some time. As a new person, I was younger, and I never really had religious experiences. In a way, it was somewhat attractive to me to have this mystical thing that I was experiencing that I had in common with these other people that was somehow unexplainable and mystical, right? But when I was actually doing the stuff, I always knew that this is really, these are just practical actions that I'm taking. And even in the big book, it talks about this being a practical program of recovery. So it's practical things that we do. And when I finally shifted all the way to being an atheist, I saw everything as absolutely practical, and I still see it that way. But when it came to how other people understand the program, I think that the problem has to do with language. So when I think about the history of the steps and how they came to be, it was a description of the experience of those specific people in 1939. And they did come from a religious background. They did come from that Oxford evangelical movement. And their experience was kind of mystical and everything, and they described it in their language and their terms. But as an atheist, I'm one of these atheists that I'm absolutely sure there's no God. I know there's no God. It's a ridiculous thing to even think about there being a God, in my opinion. So when I hear somebody saying that there's a God that's keeping them sober, I think, well, you might think that, but what's really keeping you sober, I'm just processing this in my brain, are the things that you're doing. And you're doing the same things that I'm doing, but you think there's some God that's making it possible for you. And the only reason you think that is because you're in this group that thinks that this book that was written in 1939 is the way. And so you're using the language of these people that were like almost 100 years ago now. Well, getting there. So anyway, it's a thing of language. And I just wish that there were a way to, it is changing a little bit, like people like you using Russell Brand's book. I'm hearing more and more of that now. People that are in recovery they look at the big book, which was written in 1939, which is ridiculously old now, right? And it's just like, okay, this is ridiculous. It's a very old book. It's language that I don't really use in my life and around people that I know. But I've got this other book that speaks my language, and they're going to that book. Whereas when I was getting sober in the 80s, we didn't have Amazon. We didn't, it was not like that easy to go find. And there weren't a lot of other recovery related books as far as I knew at that time. But anyway, I think it's interesting.
Yeah. And that kind of leaves me like, one of the problems I'm struggling with AA is like, what do I do now? Because I'd like to be active in the group and whatnot. When people say, are you willing to be a sponsor? I always raise my hand. But if I raise my hand in my traditional AA group and somebody wants to be me to be their sponsor, I don't want to read the book with them. I'm just like right there, like plain flat out. I don't want to read the big book with them. So how am I supposed to really be an AA sponsor? I had one sponsee for a while. I mean, I think he's sober-ish now. Who I met through our secular group, and we decided to do what I did, and we did a few steps in Russell Brand's book before he drifted away. But that was, and I look forward to maybe doing that again. But I feel like if I go to a traditional AA meeting and I get a sponsee and I say, well, we're going to use this book, I'm like stealing them, right? I'm like proselytizing for my version of it in a way. And the other thing about it is that having that sponsee who was 30 something, he was not at all interested in AA. Like he was there because he knew he needed to be there, but he thought it was just a bunch of old men and stupid shit. And like God. He had nothing positive to say. He thought our meeting was the only mostly tolerable one that he was going to. And our meeting, 8 out of 10 times our meeting is an AA meeting with little or no mention of higher powers. The other 2 times, of course, it's a resentment airing exercise, which is the trademark of secular AA.
Well, yeah, it happens especially it depends upon who is at the meeting that particular time and where they're at. So like when our group was first starting out, it's like 6 years ago now. In the very beginning, we got people who this was their first experience of a meeting where we didn't pray, we didn't talk about God, and they were relieved, and they had to talk about the comparison and the difference and the problems that they had. And then we had another group of people who were just who left AA completely because of the God business. And when they came back to our group, so we had this element of people that were angry at AA, had bad experiences with AA, or were just thought that our way was better, and they wanted to talk about that. But after a while, as the group grew, that talk kind of lessened, and after a while it got to be where it's just a regular meeting. But occasionally you'd have the person that would have to get that off their chest. That has to say, this is crazy shit. And you know, so.
That's exactly how our meeting has evolved. Yes, absolutely. And but it has also been somewhat of a gateway for those people, because I've seen a few people come in who've been, I was in AA and I hate the book. And then they start coming to our meeting. And then after a little while, you realize they're going to most of the meetings in the Palo Alto area. So kind of get them back in, and they keep coming back to our meeting because our meeting is the place where they don't have to deal with as much of that stuff.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of a delicate balance, I guess. I know I'd hate to be in a meeting where all we do is a bitch about AA, but on the other hand, if people have actually been abused by it, and there is some abuse, they need to talk about it, I guess. So it's a thing, and the difference though is that it only occurs in secular AA, because you don't hear that in a traditional AA meeting. No one's gonna bash God. no one's gonna bash the big book at a regular AA meeting, because you've got the I don't know, the sort of a desire that we have, that I had anyway in my early sobriety, of wanting to conform to what I saw everybody else doing. I don't really like that about myself, but I think that I was a real conformist in those early days, because I was like you. I really didn't have any religious ideas. I didn't understand this. I thought it was kind of cool and mystical. And I just was speaking the language that I heard in the room. And that way I was accepted, and after a while you lose yourself when you do that.
Yeah, I was worried. I wasn't quite like that. And I did try a little. I have a friend who's very evangelical, and very active in AA. He actually keeps them separate. He sees them as two separate things, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I've met people like that.
But he really pressed me to just say please and thank you. And while it sounds great, like what's wrong with, because that's what I'm trying to do. I want to be in gratitude, right? But I just found it kind of ridiculous to pray to nothing and no one. There are a lot of people in our atheist group that do pray, and I'm cool with that. But I literally felt ridiculous doing it. So I tried a couple times, but I was not willing to conform to that level. I could not do it. So, I guess I didn't fall far enough, right? it's the gift of desperation that seems to bring people there. But
you were talking about sponsoring people, Rich, and I wanted to bring this up. One difficult, I don't sponsor people. They don't want me to sponsor them. And I think the reason for that is, and I was kind of this way, when you come into the program and you're at the lowest point of your life, you almost want someone to tell you, what do I do? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Tell me what to do. And I've come to the conclusion that although the steps are a great framework for the way I live my life, there's nothing magical about them. And I've also come to the conclusion that the steps, in a way, are a natural thing that we would do, whether or not they were written in front of us or not. So in other words, I've got this theory that if you've been beaten up by alcohol, you get to a place where you say, I can't do it anymore. And you might want to put that in the words that I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. I can't do it anymore. I need help. And then you come to think that, wow, there's something out there that can help me. And you might call that step 2. I came to believe that and it's these people in the program are really helping me. And then you say, you know what, I'm going to make a commitment to this sobriety. You might call that step 3. And then you go through and you just start as a natural process of getting sober. You start comparing the difference between what your life is like now and what it was. And you start becoming more self-reflective, especially when you see other people in the meetings talking about what they've learned about themselves. And I think it's just natural to have that, starting to think more about yourself. And I guess I can't generalize that everybody's that way, because some people just don't have that ability, but I think a lot of people do. And then there's that natural desire to want to mend relationships that have been broken because of your drinking. So I think a lot of it is just kind of is stuff that you want to do anyway as you get better. And if you just kind of go to meetings and you listen to people who've already been through that part of their life, the steps kind of happen.
And you're willing to change and eager to learn.
Yeah. And there are psychopaths out there who have absolutely no interest in learning about themselves. So you have to take that into account. There are those people. So I can't say that I can't say as a general rule that's all human beings, but
I think for me, the interesting thing about these kind of things is that I have to get my one way or another. I have some glaring issue that I just can't face or that causes me pain to think about. Um, it tends to go sideways for a long time because I can't go there. But then there's either a compelling life event or like the steps, some I get myself into the right frame of mind, I become willing. And then I can confront whatever it is. And the framework of, telling these things out loud to another person, it's not new to AA. It's not even new to the Oxford group. It goes back further and further. And there's no doubt that secrets lose their power when you say them out loud. If I'm ashamed of something, I can bring myself to say it, and I'll say there are some things I still haven't talked about from my childhood and whatnot. And I don't know, maybe if I could, I'd be even better off. When I can, I'll maybe be even better off. I don't know. But you have to be willing and able, you have to be willing and then try. And hopefully once you try, you'll be able to do it.
So yeah, that was kind of my experience as I look back on it, so I kind of see I think the steps are useful. For me, they're a good framework. They're not magical. And I also caution people, early on to not think of them as a cure per se, because I've been to meetings before where people have beaten themselves up because they're depressed or they're still having problems in their life, even though they're not drinking. And they blame themselves because they're just not doing a certain step right. They think that's the reason.
I've had, yeah. And if you go online and you look at all the different stories, there's some really crazy stories about people who just decided I relapsed because I didn't do this step or that step correctly. Why do you need something to blame? I don't understand. Like you drank, like, okay, like I understand why you drank. I have nostalgia for alcohol. I also go through periods where I feel intense pain, like emotional pain that I feel like I want it to end. But through the steps and being just not drinking for so long and thinking about what happened when I was drinking, I've come to the very clear conclusion that I am not qualified to drink. I'm not the first person to say this, but my card's been revoked, right? Like I cannot. I watch other people. My wife will have 3/4 of a drink. It's maddening, and most people can have 2 or 3 if you go to happy hour with them, and then they wait an hour and they drive home. Meanwhile, I'm on beer 5 when they drive away, and now I may stop and get in the car. Typical behavior. It's not very far. Or I may not. And then when I get to like 12 or 14, God, then I might stop or I might not, and I can't have that. And then in the morning now, not only because I drink so much, but because I am so old, the hangovers are debilitating. So why, I'm not qualified to drink. I shouldn't drink. I hope I don't. I've heard so many stories about people who thoughtlessly relapse. I just hope it doesn't happen to me. I mean, it won't happen. If I think about it, it won't happen to me because, wow.
Yeah. It could be devastating.
I can't do it. I'm not qualified. I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I have alcohol use disorder.
It's yeah, that's what I say. And for me, I do believe the science of, and I can't explain the science, but there was something that happened to my, up there in my brain chemistry that just, was triggered and by alcohol. And once that has happened, I just can't, whatever the dopamine levels, whatever. So how are things for you? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, is that book, what is it called? Dopamine, the molecule of something. It's a great book because it explains how dopamine, the whole alcohol cycle and other addiction cycles and how dopamine feeds them, and it basically makes you want something, but it doesn't give it, but it just wants you to want it. Once you have it, there's not another thing that comes in and does something positive for you. All it does is make you want, right? And the biggest example that he used in the book was nicotine, right? Nicotine makes you want more nicotine. It does absolutely nothing else. Alcohol makes you want more alcohol. It also gives you a buzz. But it's just your brain chemicals are not your friend.
No, there's a Dr. Nicole Labor. You can look her up, and she does this. She did a talk at I think like University of Ohio. I can't remember where, but anyway, she actually works in Akron, Ohio, and she's an addictions doc, and she does a really good job explaining the science behind addiction in a way that I can understand it when she's telling it to me, but I have a really hard time explaining it to someone else. But it makes sense to me, the way that it's described, and once I have that, it's just a matter of staying in recovery and not putting that particular drug in my brain that's going to trigger a want for more of that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to keep the science in my head long enough to explain it to someone else as well. But like, there's that whole thing with GABA and it's basically a genetic predisposition, right? Basically this idea that we process alcohol slightly differently and that has some change in how it affects us. But which is wonderful. Okay, now that's an explanation for one of the reasons I fell into this trap. It's a trap. It's not, when I hear people say I have this disease of mind and spirit, and then they act like that absolves them of all personal responsibility. It was just easier for us to get into this state. We still got into this state. Lots of people have alcoholic parents and, horrible abusive homes. And, most of them don't have alcoholism. Some of them do. It's one of the things one of the outcomes, but it's not the only outcome at all.
So I wanted to ask you how are you doing today, and how are you doing particularly with COVID?
Yeah, I'd say that the isolation is really starting to get to me.
Yeah,
we're taking
up to getting to a year now, almost
a year. We're taking it pretty seriously. I'm 52. My wife is similar age, and we don't really want to get it, and we don't want to accidentally give it to other people. And if I wasn't in AA, I might have a different attitude, but because I'm in AA, the people that I want to hang out with tend to be old. A lot of the people are older than me that are in my support group, and I don't want to get them sick. And so we've just been very serious about it. I think I went shopping a couple of days ago. I hadn't been out of the house for 6 or 7 days. And I have a startup job where I work like from 8 a.m. until until a meeting, and then in the evening, and then a little after usually. And it's all consuming, but it's not bad. I'm stuck in my son is home from college right now. It's wonderful. I have all four members of my family are here. I like spending time with my wife. It's all great, but it's monotonous, and I want to go to a concert. Rock and roll is my main, and cycling are my two main things. Like, I've still been cycling, but obviously I can't go to the concerts, right?
Yeah. I need to get back with my bike. Actually, we bought a stationary bike, and it's a Schwinn Aerodyne, and those damn things are so freaking. I mean, they're a workout. The first time I got on there, I could stay on for like 10 minutes, and it was like, man, this is so freaking hard. And that was like a couple weeks ago. I haven't got back on it, but I need to get back on the damn thing, because I'm sure it'll get a little easier as I go along. But it's not just your legs; it's your it's everything that thing works on. It's amazing.
I think I got like over 3,000 miles last year, so that was pretty good. Or close to about 3,000 miles indoors and out. And I have this indoor bike that actually replicates the cycling experience. And there's this video game. There's a bunch of video games. The one I use is called Z-Swift. And basically you use a smart bike and you cycle with real people in a 3D world. And it makes it just this much more doable. Like, I'm not looking at the ceiling or whatever, I'm not just staring at the wall. Yeah. So it's been okay. It's been okay.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. I like bike riding too. And I agree with you. The whole COVID thing, it is starting to get old. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I can work from home. I'm not really into the Zoom meetings so much, because it's hard for me when I'm working all day long, looking at the screen and talking to my colleagues and so forth on the screen, to say, okay, now I'm going to shut this down and go on another screen and go to this AA meeting. If I just, at the end of the day, I just need to walk away from this computer screen, and I go and I move. You don't have that transition from work to home, I guess, is the thing. So like if it was like in the old days, I might be in the office working, although I used to work from home part-time anyway, but I might be in the office and then I have the drive home to break it up. And then I might, go to a meeting. Just traveling to different places kind of breaks things up for you. It's just a lot different from just being in the same, I don't know how to explain it, but other people love the Zoom meetings and they go to them, but I just have not.
I do 3 a week, and it's kind of funny because I sit in this chair here like 12, 14 hours a day. And then the bike I was talking about is right there. See the back of it there next to the guitar.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm in this particular room. Oh my God. Like about 80% of the time that I'm not sleeping, and the rest of the time I'm sitting in front of the TV with my wife and
exactly. Same here. And that is getting monotonous and old, but anyway, but that's life in this era, and we probably have another year of it, and then hopefully we'll get beyond it. But it was nice talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll survive.
Thank you. This has been really, really great. This really helped for me. Really helped me.
Yeah, actually, this is my program now. Even though I don't go to the Zoom meetings, doing these podcasts, this is my meeting for the day. And that's what I like about this podcast is I just enjoy talking to people that kind of have a similar view on things as me, and sometimes a little bit slightly different, but I enjoy it. So with that. And that's another episode of the Beyond Belief Sobriety Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to help out our podcast, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Head on over to our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and you will find a PayPal button, and you will find a button for buy us a cup of coffee. And that's just a way where you can make a small donation to help keep the podcast going. You can also become a patron on patreon.com/beyondbeliefsobriety, or you can join our YouTube channel and receive some special perks for your small monthly contributions. So if you can do that, that would be appreciated. If not, that's okay too. We'll be posting more episodes. In fact, I've got quite a few recorded now that we'll be posting, like a couple, maybe 2 or 3 a week for a little while until we get caught up. So it's great to be back with you again. Thank you for listening. We'll be back very soon with another episode. Bye-bye.